I'm going to try to take you on a step-by-step video on how to do a complete brake job with changing out your rotors and your brake pads. One of the very first things you would want to do is make sure you loosen all your lugs to the point to where you can pretty much hand remove them, or you could take an impact to remove them after you done jack the car up. Okay, once you get the lugs broken, you can put the jack up under the vehicle and start jacking the car up. And once you got the jack as far as you want it to go, remove the rest of the lugs and take your tire off. And please remember to always have a jack stand put in place, because you don't want to get up under there and the car fall on you and break your... Yeah, that's just going to be a bad day. So once you got your jack stand in place, up front, if you're changing the brakes and the rotors up front, you can turn the wheel in the opposite direction to give yourself a better vantage point for when you get to the rotors. But you're gonna have to start by taking the brakes off. With these 4-piston Brembos, it has 2 pins on the inside that's holding it in place. And you could take a punch, any tool that you could use for a punch, take a hammer to start knocking those out of place and sliding them back. And once you do that, there's also a little metal shim that's being held in place by those 2 pins. Once you take those and move them out the way, you can get a flathead screwdriver or any other prying tool to pry the brake pads out of the rotors, outside of the calipers. And once you got your brake pads removed, you can use that tool that you use to pry them out to level the pistons out. And once you get the pistons pushed completely back, all 4 of them, if you have the 4-piston setup, if you have the 6, all 6 of them, but we're doing the 4. Once you have that pushed back, you'll be ready to move on to the next step. And as you will notice right here, there's 2 bolts on the very back of this thing. That's what is holding your caliper in place, and this is how you will be able to get the rotor off. Once you break those bolts on the back manually using a ratchet or a breaker bar or whatever, you can take an impact driver to remove them a lot faster. And once you remove those, your caliper should come off completely free, and your rotor should be completely free, and you should be able to, with ease, pull the rotor off and put your brand new one on. And the reason I went with drill slotted rotors for the simple fact they're supposed to help keep the braking system cool, reduces the brake dust and things of that nature. And I also went with ceramic brake pads to reduce the amount of brake dust that's emitted. Excuse me. And once you have the new rotor in place, you can do everything in reverse order. Put your rotor back on, and when you're retightening everything with the caliper, use the impact to get it started, and then take your breaker bar ratchet towards the end to tighten it down to make sure that it's completely tight. And then afterwards, I fast forward for the time being of putting the brake pads back in. You would do everything in reverse order. You would make sure those pistons are lined up, and you would insert your brake pads, install the shim back in, and start driving your two pins that would hold that shim in place. I've left it out of this part of the video, but at the very end, when I do the back, you will be able to see it then. And once you get that in place, I would give it a quick tug test to make sure everything is holding in place. Make sure all your bolts and everything are completely tight. And after that, you can put your tire back on and move on to the next one. And I also would like to give a big shout out to my older brother for right now for showing me how to get the rotors off, because I already knew how to change brakes, but he helped me out with the front, and I've done the back completely on my own. So we would head to the back. You would pretty much do the same thing with the back. I already got the tire off. You jack everything up, put your jack stand in place. And the backs are a lot worse than the front, because up front you can turn your wheel to give yourself a better vantage point. In the back, and I'm sorry that I didn't get any video while I was down there, there's going to be a control arm, I want to say, that's going to be in the way of one of your bolts on the rotor, and it's going to make life hard if you don't know this. So you will have to take either a set of vice grips or some kind of wrench and a ratchet or some sort of breaker bar and it's a nut on the back of it that you would need to grip with the vice grips or pliers, and you'll take your ratchet to get the bolt started to where it can come completely off, and you move that arm out the way. You might see it in the video some right about now, and I'm gonna stick a clip of it in here somewhere for you to know which one to grab. You would do that, and once you move that completely out the way, it'll free the bottom bolt to where you can get the rotors off the back. You can get the bolts to the bottom part of the rotor. You can break that, and it's pretty much the same steps that you've done up front once you get to this point. Once you've broken everything, taking the bolts off, you would move it to the side, pull your rotor off, and replace it just like you did it, just like you seen at the very beginning of the video. Once you have everything in place, place your caliper back in place, hand tighten your bolts. If you want, take your impact, drive it back in, and make sure everything is in place. And take your breaker bar ratchet and give it a quarter turn, make sure it's completely tight. And then you'll get that nut and bolt and put that control arm back in using your pair of pliers or vice grips to hold that bolt in place to make sure that your nut just isn't just sitting there spinning. So once you got that back in place, you can see right here that I put the clip of me installing the brake pads back in. And I apologize if my head gets in the way. We all know it's big, so I apologize for it getting in the way. And you'll see how you can put the brakes in with the shim, the pins, and putting everything back into place. And after that, just make sure everything's completely tight. You don't have any leftover parts. And you can put your tires back on. And I forgot to mention at the very beginning of the video, once you got everything in place, you would want to go inside the car and pump the brakes, tighten everything back up to make sure everything, make sure that they tighten up and make sure they actually work. And once that's completely done, you can put your tires back on and take the jack from up under the car. Make sure you take your jack stands from up under the car and make sure you use them. We don't want you getting killed doing this. And after that, that's all it is to it. And once again, thanks to my older brother for showing me how to do it in the first half of the video. And yeah, y'all already know, rate, comment, subscribe, tell me what you think. Tell me if this is helpful or not. Sorry that some of the angles are bad. It's kind of terrible being the cameraman and the guy doing the work at the same time.